Not as long as you have been, but we've been around since 1823. First as the Texas Rangers, as you well know, when Stephen F. Austin hired 10 frontiersmen to pursue and strike those that were attacking, ranchers and settlers back in 1823. It became the Texas Rangers. In 1935, the 44th state legislature combined the Texas Rangers and the Texas Highway Patrol to create the organization that we are today, the Texas Department of Public Safety. And we have a broad spectrum of responsibilities that we've been entrusted with by the governor and the state legislature and the people of Texas, and we certainly take that seriously. And every day, our troopers, our special agents, and our Texas Rangers risk their lives to protect Texas, and they're honored to do so. I'm very proud of the men and women that do so. Texas, we've argued, when you have 268,000 square miles to begin with, you have a 1,254-mile international border with Mexico, you have 367,000 miles of coastline, you've got over 1,400 key critical infrastructure and key resources, different types in Texas, and you have the nation's petroleum industry centered in Houston and Beaumont and Port Arthur, and you've got the agriculture industry and the cattle industry that Texas has. It's important. Our state's important certainly to us, but it's important to the nation. And there's no question in terms of being an international border creates certain challenges that the people of Texas and the governor and the state legislatures have insisted that we address. If you look at the way we look at threats, okay, when you look at, there's no question Texas has a full spectrum of those, and we've categorized them along different areas. For example, terrorism is a threat. And we look at vulnerabilities. An insecure border with Mexico is a threat. There's consequences to have an insecure border with Mexico. And we've seen that in terms of how the Mexican cartels, since the 90s, have been able to dominate the drug and human smuggling market. And for the nation, and for that matter, Canada. The Mexican cartels are the #1 organized crime threat in the nation, and clearly from a Texas standpoint as well. So you look at that as from a crime threat tied to a vulnerability and an insecure border with Mexico. And we saw back in 2014, the state legislature, the governor, lieutenant governor, received a letter from him on a Thursday, it was June 17th, that said, you shall immediately begin conducting surge operations in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas to deter the organized smuggling between the ports of entry that was occurring at that point in time. At that stage, in June of 2014, there were over 53% of all illegal aliens that were arrested and apprehended along the southwest border were arrested in Starr County or Hidalgo County. And at the same time, over 33% of all the cocaine and marijuana seized in the nation along the southwest border in the same two counties. What we'd seen is a pipeline, an influx, an overflow, a torrent of Central Americans moving into Mexico and into Starr County, Rio Grande Valley, and then throughout the nation. In a large segment, we saw later moving into the Houston area, which is now where we have an MS-13 problem, a gang that's focused in Central America. So we've got these many things that are related to the border. I had an opportunity as the Homeland Security Director to talk to a number of ranchers and farmers and landowners in South Texas, and with this thing called bailouts. And those that you live along those areas recognize what that is. It means that we had smugglers that would, part of their trade craft, when they were detected by law enforcement, they would flee, and then they would run through fences, and they'd run into property, and the smuggler would always try to separate himself from the 15 or 20 or 10 individuals that they were smuggling at the time, and this is a problem for landowners, and we heard constant complaints like this. We also heard complaints from landowners about things had changed. It wasn't the same people that were being smuggled across. These were individuals that were ganged up, tied to the cartel. And sure enough, there's nothing that crosses the Rio Grande River that the Mexican cartels don't make a piece of the money on. They started as drug trafficking organizations in the 70s, moved out through the 80s, but now they're organized crime entities engaged in all aspects of crime, including human trafficking, commercial sex trafficking, as well as theft, oil theft, and certainly corruption is one of their operational methods they've used for years. And the Mexican cartels have also done something that we hadn't seen before. In my former career with the FBI, we worked with Cosa Nostra, the Gambino family, Lucchese, okay, and those Bonanno family. They were certainly diversified. They had many different crimes, engaged in extortion and kidnapping, but never did they militarize themselves like the Mexican cartels, who basically co-opted segments of the Mexican military to go work for them as their arm, their defense arm, their proactive military arm within the cartels. Whether it's the Zetas, who we hear today, that became their own cartel right now. They were Mexican military commandos trained to go after the Gulf cartel, but through corruption, they're their own cartel right now. And something else the Mexican cartels did that was disturbing, and it continues today, is that they've adopted terrorist tactics. So we hear about the beheadings, and certainly throughout the Middle East. ISIS, Islamic State, is clearly involved in it. Al-Qaeda, Sunni extremists, been involved in some horrific events. And they basically sensationalize and try to desensitize their following to an extreme violence. Even at a very young age, they want kids kicking around heads that have been lopped off. They do that on purpose. Well, they don't have anything on the Mexican cartels. The Mexican cartels will use acid baths, they'll use torture, they'll behead people, they'll hang them from the highways, and they go after journalists, they go after mayors, they go after lawyers, they certainly go after the military and their families. Nothing's sacred to the Mexican cartels. And our concern is that a generation of youth has been lost in northern Mexico. They didn't used to have a drug problem in northern Mexico, but they do now. Because they'll feed them, they'll pay off with cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and marijuana. And as a result, northern Mexico now has an addict population. And they've got this worship thing going on in terms of the cartels regarding Saint Muerta, okay? A spin-off of Catholicism that worships a particular saint, that protects the cartels. And we've seen this, and some of this narco-culturism move into the Houston area and some other areas of the Texas. And recognized in terms of these ballads, you'll see in some of the lounges. How's that? Better? How's that? Okay. Ignore everything else I said before. So again, many challenges that the state faces. And back when I received that letter, they said go forward and conduct surge operations in the Rio Grande Valley. There's a couple things, reasons for that. That was the center of gravity of the nation at that point in time. 5 days later, we began, round-the-clock operations. When I say round-the-clock operations, we're talking about patrol operations on the ground, also tactical operations, air operations, 24/7, patrols by air, and the same thing on the water. We eventually had to get on the water with some tactical boats that created the entire tactical marine unit just to address the cartels. Because one thing was clear, is that you can't let the cartels, you can't turn over one square inch of Texas to anybody. And certainly not the Mexican cartels. They're cowards, they're thieves, and they're butchers. They've killed over 100,000 Mexican nationals, since the wars broke out in 2005. So, again, border security is not a job, and you can't find it in the Constitution, and you won't find it in the Penal Code, where the Texas Department of Public Safety is responsible for border patrol, or patrolling the border. Plain and simple. There is no state violation for immigration, for that matter. But it was very clear from the people of Texas, from the legislature, from the government, that it is our job, but they tell us it's our job. And we needed to do something at that point. And all we did was simply apply law enforcement physics, things that work. We know. Smuggling is not motivated by ideology. It's motivated by crime. They don't make any money unless that cocaine and methamphetamine and heroin gets across, but also gets back to in ways of cash. And if you can saturate an area and increase the risk that the load is going to get knocked off, it's going to force them to move elsewhere to push the smuggling area in other areas. The advantage of that is some of the organized crime-related activities that occur right at the border, such as stash house robberies, high-speed evasion pursuits, the corruption, all of those things, you can push them out of the area, including bailouts. And you can push them closer to the the border and closer to the water. You can't secure the border 62 miles off, 100 miles off, and then checkpoints don't work. You have to do it right at the river. That's how you have to do it. And it can be done. As we've explained to Congress and been asked back and testified on a number of occasions, if they will properly resource the Border Patrol, you can't have sufficient resource and equipment with technology, given sufficient air assets, you can't secure it, plain and simple. And if you use a layered approach, you start using technology. There's not enough bodies in the world to do it effectively. But there's technology keeps getting cheaper and smaller. And we found that, this leveraging wildlife cameras at $350 a piece, using the cellular backbone, we've deployed 5,000 cameras. Right now, I say we, Border Patrol, has installed 95% of them. Because they weren't given the type of technology to be able to, they're stuck with $14,000 sensors and can't tell the difference between a two-legged and a four-legged animal, which is highly inefficient. The aircraft have been given by the legislation whether it's helicopters or it's our high-altitude aircraft, just simply, hey, borrow from the military in terms of what they do. These MX-15 can see 3 miles off. So we've got the coordinates, every Border Patrol sensor, every camera, over 5,000 cameras we have installed in the area of operation. And we have all those, logged into our helicopters and to our aircraft. And so anytime there's a hit, we're immediately notified. We can swing the MX-15 over, see it, and ensure that we can coordinate a capture, an interdiction. So there's some things that, like I said, can't be done. Talking to ranchers, back in 2009, and actually in 2007 was the first one that, landowners are feeling fear because of the cartel activity I talked about. No longer it's the same type of individuals coming across. It's unacceptable. We need to combat that. What we've done is we created the Texas Ranger Recon Team. We've since established the DPS SWAT team to support that, and special route response tactical teams that we run in these areas because we can't, again, the cartels are for real. The same thing on the river. And the challenge on the river is this, is that with salt cedar and Carrizo cane, anytime you operate, you're operating in an ambush situation. Make no mistake about it. And the only thing that's going to get you out of an ambush, those in the military, those who serve the Navy, those who have patrolled, riverine type of, conducted riverine type of operations, is going to be one. You can't have some limited protection as it relates to ballistic panels. But you need speed, and you need to be able to deliver firepower and return firepower and get out of the area, the ambush area. And again, we keep troopers on the river 24/7. And so we purchased, the state legislature, we're able to purchase some tactical boats. They're not the typical law enforcement boats. They come with 6 machine guns on them. And I can tell you the reason for it. Very simple. Border Patrol has been over 100 officers shot at on the river patrolling since 2011. It's over 100. I won't give you the exact number. And they've continually done that and to intimidate and force our federal partners off the river. If you're getting shot at, boat operation cease. Well, it's important to be proactive. And the thing I'm proud of most is about our tactical ratings, because we've got not just the 6 machine gun, we also have jet boats as well that can do shallow water, 15 feet of water. Those who know the Rio Grande water, so the Rio Grande River, it does get shallow, but be able to operate in that level of water as well. And we have yet to have one officer fired upon, and since we've been in operation around the clock. The cartels don't take a shot with the black and white boats and say Texas Highway Patrol. And they know that, hey, guess what? We know the rule, the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure allows us, they shoot us, we shoot back. Plain and simple. And we've been shot at one time. They didn't know. We had this is one of the reasons why the boats are important, the type of equipment we have. We have what they call a safe boat, the Texas Rangers were operating. The Texas Rangers were all around. And from the pump house, they were shot at, 6 shots at the Texas Rangers. And naturally, we returned fire. Now, I know we received a little bit of criticism later. I recall a press conference we had in Rio Grande Valley, wondering why, they fired 6 shots and we fired over 200 rounds. And my point was that's what we had. We had 4 we fired more. Okay? So it's important, you know, I'm still trying to make a joke of it, but it's important to have that proactive, in your face, we're protecting Texas, and that's it. They're cowards. You know, they kill women and children. You can't back off in that regard. And we're confident that, and we're very hopeful that our Border Patrol partners will soon take the mission over completely. We recognize that they're not there yet. It's going to take a while to beef up the Border Patrol. An additional 5,000 agents is going to take a long time to do that. But in the meantime, we're working closely with them every day. We've got even 14 units, and we put a Texas State Trooper in a Border Patrol unit because there's concurrent jurisdiction. If we can't get them with federal jurisdiction, a federal crime, we can get them with state crime. I can tell you another thing that I was concerned about when I testified before Congress. Made it very clear. In fact, I was actually embarrassed, is that the federal government wasn't prosecuting people that were assaulting Border Patrol agents. And how is that you can assault a police officer, a Border Patrol agent, and you're not, one, investigated by the FBI, and two, prosecuted by the United States Attorney? It's not acceptable. I know it can be done. I did it when I was an FBI agent. Did it all the time. Assault a federal officer. And you can expect those brave men and women to be on the river to fight, for defending the country. You can expect when they're assaulted that they're prosecuted. Well, I'm going to compliment the Board of Prosecutors that was funded by the Texas legislature, our assistant district attorneys along the border. They take those cases. And we work with the Texas Rangers, investigate them, and they prosecute them. We've done over 14 of those cases now. We'll continue to do so. I'm confident that the new Attorney General session will change that policy. We'll start prosecuting. We won't have to do that extra additional responsibility. But we do recognize it's important. If you're going to be risking their lives, you need to take care of while they're down there, and certainly Border Patrol appreciates that. And talk about some of the impacts in the immediate area. What happens if the border doesn't stay on the border? It goes throughout Texas and really goes throughout the nation. You got an opiate overdose problem in New York City. You got a border problem in New York City. Plain and simple. You got a Zeppelin problem. You got a Gulf cartel problem. We have all 8 of the Mexican cartel that's command and control elements operating in Texas. All 8 of them. That's all the way even to the Tijuana cartel out in San Diego. So it's a challenge for us. But what really is concerning, if you look at it from a high level, 10,000 foot or even a 1,000 foot level, is the relationship between the Mexican cartels and gangs. Because gangs have always been responsible for a disproportionate amount of violence and crime in the community. It's always been that way. Right now, you go to TCJ and ask, our prison system and look at the gang members, what they're in jail for. Is it for drug violations? Is it for property crime? 59% of them are there for violent crime. In the gangs where it's blood in and blood out, like the Texas Syndicate, Mexican Mafia, that means that when you go down, you never quit. That means when you get out, you're going to be doing more crime when you get out. Plain and simple. So that relationship now, the cartel's using them as their labor, not just in terms of supporting them on both sides of the border to move cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and marijuana into and people, and being involved in sex trafficking, commercial sex trafficking of children. Those things are going on because the gangs are supporting those operations. And the stash houses, they're managing stash houses in the Rio Grande Valley. These stash houses don't remain there, they continue on. And I'll give you an example of sex trafficking. Why it's important. Human trafficking is an important aspect to be involved in and investigate. We had an investigation. 13 illegal aliens were up here operating for a number of years. And what they would do is they would recruit, entice children, young women from Central America or from Mexico. One of the guys, they'd be coming up here to be a nanny or work in the service industry or work as a housekeeper. When they would get them here, they'd debrief them so they know exactly where their family members are, and have all the numbers so they can contact if they ever were to leave, they know where those family members are. Then they'd gang rape them and compel them to prostitution. We rescued one girl at 21 years old, and she'd been there since 13 years old. She'd escaped twice, but she had to go back because of the threats to her family. And 45, for 45 to 15 minutes, it's $45 for these girls. And we did a wiretap on that particular investigation, and you have to change the entire investigative strategy because these are victims. They're no longer subjects, they're victims. And you got to find a way to rescue them during the course of your investigation. So that's why that, a unsecured border does, secure border does matter. The proliferation of organized criminal activity. When I talk about gangs, and one of the threat from gangs is that, I'll use an example of like the United Nations case in Houston. Those of you who are familiar with Mexican Mafia, its headquarters is in San Antonio. It's been always a long-term standing prison gang. Violence, typically it used to be military structured, and the hierarchy structured they're moving to a clique structure now because of successful law enforcement operations. We had Mexican Mafia working with a Chinese gang, street gang, in Houston, working with a blood sect, in one of the streets, from one of the neighborhoods in Houston, working with the Aryan Brotherhood. You know what the Aryan Brotherhood is? A bunch of neo-Nazis, white racists, thugs in prison. So you got racists working with, so you got blacks, Asians, Hispanics, all working together with the Gulf Cartel for cocaine. Because the cartels have created not just super labs to produce methamphetamine, they've actually got factories. They brought in Chinese chemists. So you've got this type of, confluence of things happening in the city of Houston and Harris County. What we're seeing is we're concerned about is you see this uptick in violent crime. And violent crime has a significant impact in terms of whether it's the economy within the community, certainly the quality of life, residential prices of homes. It does make a difference. Crime does make a difference. And so those are some of the consequences of an unsecured border. MS-13, this is a gang that really was established in the 70s in Los Angeles as a result of El Salvadorians that had migrated there during the Civil War, and it brought a level of violence, a violent streak with them, banded together, the Mexican Mafia, to fend off other gangs. And now, their own gang, in terms of MS-13, they threaten national security in Central America, some of the countries. They continue to operate, and we had all these unaccompanied children swarm in and throughout, and now based in Houston. The ones from El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, they had gang ties to MS-13. We've had kids killed, I say kids because you're 13 years old, you've got to be in a gang in El Salvador. We've had kids killed because they refused to kill their cousin or because they accept Jesus Christ. And the order came from El Salvador, the execution. And they had a 40 Glock handgun. They used a machete because that's the calling card of MS-13. Now you're hearing MS-13 is a problem in New York. It's always been a problem in Long Island, New York, Northern Virginia, and also Florida. But now Houston's a hub for MS-13. And this is, again, some of the challenges that we face, and how can we be proactive and identify these patterns and trends, and what strategies we can use, working collectively, no competition, working local, state, and federal collectively, to maximize the impact of these organizations that threaten Texas. And that's the challenge that we have. And we're mindful, always, that if you can cross between the ports of entry without being detected, that's a problem. It's a serious problem. And we've had, since it goes back to when I was even the special agent in charge of the FBI in San Antonio back in 2002, is we had foreign nationals from countries where they know Al-Qaeda and Sunni terrorism presence being arrested coming between the ports of entry. I mean, you wouldn't give an opportunity to be able to detect them from ongoing measures or tripwires outside of them. They come in and they successfully come in between the ports of entry. And that continues today. They're from countries from Afghanistan to Yemen. They're coming through. And we're concerned because it's not what you know, it's what you don't know. It's also what you know. You don't follow up on, but it's all the bottom line is you need to know. And we've got enough subjects to follow around, the FBI does, and the Joint Terrorism Task Force as it is. Because what's happened is although crime has become, we've seen crime has become more globalized, and certainly dispersed or integrated through gangs and cartels. We've seen that terrorism has become more dispersed, meaning that they don't need a sophisticated Al-Qaeda plot. They work on it for 3 years on the Cole bombing, or work on it 2 years for the East Africa bombings, or for 9/11. These sophisticated big type plots. ISIS has figured out they can recruit the disaffected here using social media, by showing people extreme violence on videos, using Facebook, using Twitter. Being able to communicate that way, but communicate to an audience and attract certain people to kind of convert them, okay, to radical Islam, and use them as a weapon against us, encourage them to use, soft targets. There's no need to, or simple means that none will work. A gun will work. You don't have to be sophisticated. A car will work. So right now, a weapon of destruction can be a motor vehicle, as we've seen what they did in Nice in France. It could be a knife, like we saw that police officer at the airport in Michigan. And it can certainly be a gun, like Neil Hassan up in Fort Hood, who killed 19 brave servicemen in a terrorist attack that he was engaged in. So these things, the problem with those things is you don't know where those are at and where they're occurring. And that means that movies, malls, and shopping centers are now targets. And we also know that they seek to destroy us for our way of life. And every time they do an attack, we lose a little bit more freedom to move around. That's usually by self-instituted, because we're a little nervous about going to that location again. And that has an impact. So, we're mindful of that from a challenge standpoint. So